Right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Rachel. I am the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator with the Greenville County Library System. I'm so glad that you've all come to join us for our second excursion in our Armchair Traveler series. Tonight, we're traveling to Denmark. In the meantime, before we get started with our wonderful presenter, make sure that your microphones are muted so that we can all focus on the presentation. And then at the end, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So be thinking about questions. If you don't want to ask your questions over the microphone, you can always put them in the chat box. And you can do that at any time during the presentation, and I'll be sure to get those to our presenter towards the end. So if you're interested in more of our adult virtual events, please go to greenvillelibrary.org, and there you can click on virtual events and see our virtual events calendar. You can register for any of our upcoming events, including our next Armchair Traveler event, which is going to Bulgaria, and that is next week on Tuesday. So make sure that you sign up for that one too. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to introduce you to our presenter. So Ben Eford is currently the Assistant Director of Study Away and International Education at Furman University. That's right here in Greenville, South Carolina. We all love Furman. Ben is a 2008 graduate of Elon University in North Carolina, where he majored in history and minored in political science. While an undergraduate at Elon, he participated on a short-term January program focused on World War II and the Holocaust. This experience, which inspired his interest in international travel and cross-cultural exchange, was the motivating factor in his decision to spend a semester of his junior year studying European history in Copenhagen, Denmark. So after graduating, Ben was offered a short-term position in Copenhagen through DIS, Study Abroad, as their marketing and institutional relations intern. So this experience profoundly impacted his own cultural, social, and political beliefs. And after returning to the US, he knew he wanted his career pathway to be focused with international education. So after attending the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, he obtained his master's in communication studies with a concentration in international public relations in 2011. So after that, Ben was hired by DIS North American office to work on their enrollment team and then marketing and institutional relations team. Since making the leap into the field of international education, Ben has worked at high-quality nonprofit academic study abroad providers such as DIS and the School for International Training. He's been in his current position with Furman since November 2017 and is proud to work for a liberal arts institution with a commitment to increasing diversity and broadening access to international educations for all of its students. So please join me in welcoming Ben Eford. Ben, take it away.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction. I'm very honored to be here and to be able to share my story with all of you. As Rachel said, my name is Ben Eford. I'm the Assistant Director of the Rinker Center for Study Away and International Education at Furman. Here at Furman, ever since our new president, President Davis, came in 2016, we've had a really big mission in charge that we've called the Furman Advantage. So basically, we're trying to increase access to things like international education, internships, and research to 100% of our student body, regardless of need. We want all of our students to have these kinds of experiences that I'm about to share a little bit with you all before I talk about the fun stuff about Denmark that transformed who I am and kind of led me into this career path that I'm in now. So I will pull up my presentation and show you guys what I have, let's see, put together for you. Can everybody see that?
Yes, looks good.
All right, I'll get started. So, as Rachel said, I lived in Denmark for a total of almost 2 years. I studied abroad there through the spring and into the summer of my junior year of college, and then was fortunate enough to be hired on as their intern for institutional university relations, which is essentially their marketing team to recruit students back in the US. So I lived in Copenhagen as a full-time employee at DIS, where I studied for a year before I went to graduate school. So I did want to start with the basics. I thought that was best, considering some of you may have lived there or be from there. Some of you might not have ever seen it on a map. So I just wanted to kind of give everybody some context to start. So Denmark, it is a small Nordic country. It's the only Scandinavian country that's attached to mainland Western Europe, just north of Germany. It's a really small nation, mostly an island nation. And then here is just so you can see it relative to the rest of Europe. Some people don't know this, but Denmark is actually a kingdom because it oversees Bornholm, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. They are autonomous. Greenland especially has the most autonomy of the three, but Denmark is technically still the crown over them and still has actually some administrative and political roles within how they function. So they have Greenland, the Faroes, and Bornholm, which is that tiny little island east of Sweden that Denmark and Sweden for thousands of years fought for, took over back and forth. But for the past about 100 years, it's been part of Denmark, so that's relatively stable. So just to give you some context before I really dive into what is Denmark, what's Copenhagen like, talking a little bit about the history, the culture, a little bit about their political structure and their innovation for the future. But my story is, as Rachel said, I went to Elon. I majored in history and political science. I went to college in North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. My whole family's been from small town North Carolina. So I did not go into college expecting to study abroad, but fortunately in my young age, I picked a university that was a liberal arts school, and they carefully guided me into that direction of curiosity. And I kind of took the leap and spent a January, it was a full month of my sophomore year, just in one course in Europe with Elon faculty and other Elon students that was focused on World War II and the Holocaust. So it was a deep dive into Holocaust studies and World War II. This was really the first time in my life I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I pretended I wasn't. Even going with faculty and other students, I had never traveled without my family. I'd never been abroad. I had been out of the Southeast 2 or 3 times at most at that point. And of all the great things I've got to experience in my life, I truly think that 1 month at 19 years old was the most transformative experience of my life to this point. And I will explain, so I didn't forget to kind of elaborate quickly on that. For me, if I had never done that, I would have never, ever had the courage to take the leap to spend a semester in Europe by myself on a program that was not associated with my school. I would have never, ever had the courage to spend a year living and working abroad. So I think that really altered my trajectory in terms of my confidence and maturity and just cultural competency and how to interact with the world, especially outside of where I felt safe. So because of that, I did want to go abroad for a semester and was able to study European history in Copenhagen the spring of my junior year. It was an incredible experience. And then, I was kind of trying to decide, like everybody else, their senior year of college, I was kind of having existential dread and senioritis crisis. And of course, I graduated in 07, 08. It was right when the economy crashed. And so I had no clue what to do, and was kind of frantically looking everywhere, and had heard from my study away office, like the one I work at Furman, that they hired full-time paid interns, that it was highly competitive, but it was worth applying. And I was very fortunate enough to be selected to be their marketing and university relations intern. And so moved to Copenhagen for a full year, and lived and worked there before coming home to go to grad school and start my career at home. And I just included some personal pictures. These are pictures that I took when I studied abroad at 19. These are some of my friends from when I studied abroad. The woman to the left of me and the guy on the far right lived in Minneapolis when I was up there, and we stayed friends ever since. I've seen their kids, so it's a full circle. That's Rådhusplassen, and I took that picture right outside of where DIS's base is in central Copenhagen. And this is from my time as an intern. I just wanted to share this when I was very young and energetic at that time. But this was our cohort of interns, all DIS alums. Some of them still live there and work for DIS. Some of them married Danes and have kind of fully integrated and become Danish citizens. And most of us are back home. But it really was a transformative professional experience that I was led to because I took a leap and spent a month in Europe as a 19-year-old sophomore at Elon. So kind of going away from me, I wanted you guys to have the context of why I was there and what I was doing. A little Danish history. So from the 8th to 10th century, that is when Danish culture as it has developed into its modern sense today really started to form. That was the era of the Viking Age and when they started expansion and expanding and exploring into what is now the UK and Ireland. And really that extends all the way back to the man known as Gorm the Old, who is kind of seen as the father of Scandinavia. The current queen of Denmark can actually trace her bloodline to Gorm. So Gorm the Old was essentially the original queen, original king, and his bloodline goes back to 900. But from 1536 to 1849, like the majority of Europe, they were an absolute monarch rule. That was it. They were unique in that they were one of the few countries that had a very peaceful transfer away from absolute monarch. But if you look at the date, that makes sense. So June 5th, 1849, they had seen what happened in France. They had seen several other bloody revolutions, and the people were escalating to that point, and the monarch made the decision to say, we're ready to let you have those freedoms. So it was seen as a peaceful transfer, which worked out for the royal family because they are still around, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. So, now we've transitioned into what is, the constitutional monarchy of today, a democracy similar to the UK's. But kind of the World War II era, when we get past that, I wanted to kind of highlight it. Will make more sense when I talk a little bit more about Danish culture and society, but wanted to highlight something that Denmark's known for in World War II, because you don't hear much about Denmark. But on October 1st of 1943, everyday Danish fishermen and citizens in the dark of night, middle of the night, started a rescue mission because they had heard Hitler was sending his troops in to start rounding up Jews to send them out to camps, and basically shuttled all of the Jews that were willing to go over the Øresund Sound so they could go up north into northern Sweden near the Arctic Circle into hiding because they were neutral. And because of these efforts over a few days span, over 99% of Jews in Denmark survived the Holocaust. So that's an important point I like to make because I think they should always be proud of that. Post World War II to today, and I'll dive more into this, but they are a democracy, but they consider themselves democratic socialism to an extent, and they have a very robust welfare state, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Wanted to throw in a few pictures too to make it a little more exciting. This is the royal family as they stand today. So that's Queen Margrethe II in the middle, and her son to the left, and then his wife and their children. And I wanted to include some of the castles because there's interesting stories, and of course they tie directly to Queen Margrethe's family. King Christian IV, he really is the one that's seen as giving birth to what is modern Danish society. He was very forward thinking, very progressive, very focused on what was modern at the time, architecture. And so this is Rosenborg Castle, and it's unique because it's a small castle, really close to what is the main city center. But when you actually get closer, you realize back in its day, it was right at the edge of the wall to the city. And so it was fortified in amongst itself right outside of the main city wall. And the reason for that is so the king didn't get ill, because cities at that time were not sanitary. So Rosenborg Castle is right in the city, but for sanitation reasons, and there was dysentery and disease, the plague at the time, the castle was just right outside. So this was considered his summer home, his vacation house. This was his side house, but it's got a beautiful garden and it's right by the city center. But he was the one that started really strategically thinking about urban planning and city planning. And that was kind of tied to when he built this in 1606. And then this is Kronborg Castle, which is in Helsingborg up north. It's right on the Øresund Sound, at kind of the closest point in the waterway to Sweden. The first form of this structure, and there's been one on it ever since, was built in 1420s by King Eric VII. And it's very strategic because Sweden and Denmark for hundreds of years were taking over that southern part of Sweden back and forth and constantly in battle. And so that was why it was strategically placed there. And if you didn't know, this is the castle that Shakespeare used as inspiration for Hamlet. So kind of leading from that into what Danish politics looks like today. They do have a parliamentary system. I like to highlight, they have 6 active parties across the spectrum. So based on their percentage of votes is how many members of parliament from that party are in parliament. So obviously they've got a lot of negotiating and having to work to make, to reach a consensus. But generally, the Social Democrats and Venstre, which is a left party, it's actually even further left than Social Democrats, tend to share some maintenance of control with other parties from the middle to all the way to the far right, holding power balance as well. Like I said, a really key central focus of their government is on social services and maintaining a really robust formal social welfare state and system. So some examples of that, guaranteed maternity and paternity leave, they actually just call it parental leave, and it totals a full year. I was actually telling Rachel before all of you joined us that typically how it's structured is the mother takes the first full month off before she gives birth, and then it's understood or expected that she would take the next 12 weeks. And then after that, if let's say the mother is the breadwinner and wants to go back to work quicker, they can trade and her husband can stay home for multiple months, but they get a full year to share between them to stay home with their children. And then after that, before they're in school, and even when they're in school, the supplemental care before parents are out of work is of high quality and covered by taxes and the Danish government. Universal publicly funded healthcare, and university advanced degrees, law degrees, and medical degrees are free of cost to citizens. And even for undergrads, if they finish their degree, I believe it's within 5 or 6 years, they get a living stipend so that they don't have debt when they finish school. And I did want to say, far from perfect. I think it's really easy for a lot of us that's on the surface see the positives of these things for the greater good of society as, oh, it's just this perfect utopia. They're the happiest country in the world. But I like to say it's far from perfect because having lived there, you start to really see some of the muck or things that society kind of hides from the surface level view of visitors or tourists. And so I think that conflicts really come into play the last 30 to 40 years with a big wave of immigration and asylum seekers. So the Danish welfare state was built, post World War II, post Holocaust, to really, the Social Democrats took control, and they really said, we want to have a advanced, progressed society where nobody's living in poverty, nobody's worried about their children dying of malnutrition, and really started from there. And then the 70s, 80s, they had a work shortage and were taking in many workers from the Middle East, from Poland. And unfortunately, as those people came and stayed and their family came because they were building income and had a better way of life, the Danes started not wanting to share the welfare state that they're paying taxes into. And it's kind of been this contentious hot button issue. And unfortunately, it's led to even some of the more progressive parties getting a really hard line on immigration. They have actually the hardest, I think, immigration policies and standards of any EU country. You are given a quota. You have to learn fluent Danish and pass like an 8-hour exam. 4 of it's a spoken test within a certain amount of time. So they're really tightening down. They've tried some of the parties. For example, I said the rise of the Danish People's Party from 2008 into the present day. They're the 3rd most powerful party in the parliament, and they are very hard right, to the point of not even wanting to allow women to wear a head covering that are Muslim, and saying that Muslim children should have to eat pork at school because it's a Danish tradition and staple. So like really pushing the envelope. So I wanted to point out that they have their issues too. They have their societal issues and their issues with prejudice and racism that it's starting to come more to light, and they're having to really grapple with it and address it. A little bit more about Danish culture and society. They are very progressive and forward thinking. Sustainability and green initiatives. So Copenhagen plans to actually be the first ever carbon neutral city by 2025. So we've got, 2.5, 3 years, and they are saying we will be carbon neutral. I like this fact too, bike and public transit culture. It is a bike city. Everyone bikes. Over 50% of Copenhagen residents bike to work daily. It's also, I think, it's really nice because it kind of breaks down the socioeconomic stigma I think many Americans outside of really big major cities have around public transit and biking to work. I mean, you'll see doctors, the prime minister bikes from her home into parliament. Everybody bikes. It's everybody takes public transit. And that partly is due to cost because cars are taxed 180% of their value there. So most families only have one if they have a car. LGBTQ and gender equality is a key focus of government and society, especially on the gender equality end in the workplace, you know, with parental leave. There have some of the highest rates of women in high level leadership roles in private business sectors in the government of any country in the world. And they're really renowned for their forward-thinking furniture design and architectural concepts. I think especially the architecture piece has really what's put Denmark on the map the last 10 to 15 years. I think they've always been known for their furniture. The mid-century modern was kind of a Danish invention of these sleek, clean lines and these kind of minimalist colors. But you know, if you're ever interested in what they're doing with architecture today, if you don't know much, just Google, you know, Danish architecture 2021, and I'll have some examples of that next. But really forward-thinking architectural concepts tied mostly to good use of urban space and sustainability. So Danes do have a very, I think, the social welfare state and longevity. I mean, most of these people can trace their bloodlines to 900. Very strong national ties to identity, customs and traditions, some of which the Danes will admit are head scratchers to any of us non-Danes. And I think another thing that they're at the forefront right now is new Nordic cuisine. Up until a few years ago, people thought of Scandinavia as pickled creamed herring and pickled salmon and baby potatoes, and that is true. They do love to eat that, but there's been this kind of fusion of sustainability and organic found in nature products melded with like high-end dining, and it's really put them on the map in Europe as kind of the new Nordic cuisine. So here's some images. This is the first thing I remember at 20 years old, landing as a junior in college. Was the first thing you see is just a line of hundreds of windmills in the ocean, in the Sound, right before you land in downtown Copenhagen. And it blew my mind as a young American from the South to see those. It was almost like being on a different planet at the time. And this is one of the buildings they recently built that is actually a power plant. Denmark is very, very flat. There are no hills or mountains. It's part of the reason it's easy for them to be a bike culture. But because of that and getting innovative, this is a power plant and huge. It's one of the big prominent architectural firms there designed it to be a ski slope because there's really nowhere to ski in Copenhagen. And so people reserve well in advance and can go, and they actually can ski and take the lift back up. And so he's really trying to, you know, he says, I want to be offensive and get in your face and show you that urban space can be green, and we can start to really utilize this in a way that benefits us mutually. So bike culture, rain, shine, snow, sleet. Danes always say, this is really a Danish saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, just poor clothing. So they bike year round, it doesn't matter. I wanted to put that picture in because it doesn't, yeah, rain, shine, doesn't matter. And then there's bikes everywhere. So if you do go to Copenhagen on vacation or to visit, make sure you remember where you put your bike, because if you go sightseeing and go back to get it and you didn't really mark where you put it, it's going to be a problem. And then I wanted to throw in some of the kind of signature iconic looks of Danish mid-century modern furniture. So again, like I said, they have some traditions that are head scratchers to us. They're interesting. The guy on the left up top is at his bachelor party. So they have a tradition of dousing men in like an absurd amount of cinnamon powder, and I don't really understand why, but they basically kidnap you when you're not expecting it and rip your clothes off to your underwear and cover you in cinnamon with a mask and goggles on. And then there's Fastelavn, which that started, I believe, in the 1500s. It's kind of their version of Halloween. It's a celebration where children dress up, but it was to ward off evil spirits. And they beat a barrel full of candy with a stuffed cat in it. And then when it breaks, the cat falls out and they get candy. And unfortunately, until the early 1900s, they put a real black cat in it. It never killed the cat, it just scared it and it was abusive. So they did switch to stuffed cats, but they still kept the tradition alive to some extent. And then the bottom left is St. Hanstorf. So that is the Midsummer's Night. That's the summer solstice. They're big on evil spirits back in the 15 and 1600s because this is also to ward off evil spirits and to start, the longest day on a positive note because they burn a witch in effigy. So they burn a fake witch and families, they all do this. So this was probably at a big park, but families will do a mini version with like a mini witch. So it's kind of any which way depending on where you are, but wanted to share some of those fun traditions with you. So Hygge, some of you have probably heard of this because it's definitely been in the media more the last few years. This is a concept that really does not have an English translation, but this is the closest to it. So it's this Danish concept, hygge, of an atmosphere of warmth, well-being, and coziness when you feel at peace or able to enjoy simple pleasures or being in the moment. So it's really about just enjoying it could be anything. You could be at work and be busy, but you take a moment to get coffee with your best friend and have a laugh. And you say, oh my gosh, that was hygge. I needed that. Or it can be a setup event with candles. It's really about enjoying the space and time and people that you're with at that moment intentionally. So the art of hygge, this is really what it is. You're playing with your kids and you build a tent and you have socks. It's about having mulled wine and coffee and turning off the lights and lighting candles. Part of the reason for this, it brings community, it brings connectivity, it brings family together, but it's also utility because 6 months out of the year, it is pretty much just dark all day, every day. And when the sun is out, it is so overcast and gray that it looks almost dark anyway. So I think it's a mechanism to drag that happiness through until the sun comes out, but it does a pretty good job. And then I wanted to kind of towards the end just include some fun facts and figures. Some of them I would have put on this slide, but included them earlier. The Danish flag is the oldest flag still used by a nation in the world today. I believe 1230 or 40, 12 something. I'd have to look it up. Legos were invented in Denmark. They actually stole the Danish pastry they're famous for from Austria. It was unintentional. Austrian immigrants moved to the city of Copenhagen in the 1800s and opened bakeries, and then they became famous for the bakeries they made. So that is, Austrians created the Danish. This, I think, is really interesting. The two oldest amusement parks in the world are in Copenhagen. The first one, Bakken, opened in 1583. And Tivoli Gardens, that's the one that's actually in the city center. That is the oldest amusement park in a city in the world, and it opened its gates in 1843. And then the unofficial law of Janteloven. So this loosely means no one is better than the other. And I think this is a great way to kind of sum up what I was saying about the welfare state and this idea of to some extent, tribal identity, the good and the bad that can come with that. It's this idea that no one is better than the other. And so it's a guiding principle of day-to-day Danish life. They are not cutthroat and trying to claw their way up the ladder in the same way we are. They really try not to brag and be boastful. They try to share credit when credit should be shared. So I include the example, it goes well for us. A lot of times Danish people will respond that way when asked about something personal. So for example, I could ask my host mom, oh my gosh, you got that promotion at work. And she would say, yeah, I got it. It goes well for us. Like the inference is like, it benefits all of us in Denmark when we do better and when we move forward, because we're all trying to move the goalpost forward. So thank you very much, everybody.
All right, great. So now we're open for Q&A. So if you have any questions about Denmark, or if you're planning a trip, or just want to learn something more, now's your chance to ask Ben. He's a wealth of knowledge. So we have a couple of questions already in the chat. So
Okay.
while the rest of you think about it, we'll go ahead and get to those. The first one was, what is their tax rate?
Um, it depends on how much you make, but I mean, most people are paying anywhere between 40 to 60% income tax. But it's important to note that people are paid much more. And I hate to say it this way, but for simplicity's sake, there's way less to think about for them. Pensions are guaranteed, they're beyond generous. And then, if you're in a really successful job, if you're the CEO of a company or running a hospital, you can, of course, get supplemental retirement. But the goal is that, like, what the government gives you for pension, they put money aside for your vacations when you retire, that are tied to that and budgeted out for, like, they can use it for other things. It is very much the idea of big government supporting their people. Um, yeah, so the tax rate is high, but they don't pay for their children to go to college. They don't pay to go to med school or law school, trade school even. They go and get certified. And while they're doing that, they get either a place to live or a formal living stipend money for food. They have their public transit included. So the goal is high sticker price with a lot of inclusions.
That's great. Thank you. Um, okay, and then the next question is, what was the hardest thing to adjust to in Denmark as an American?
Um, I think my answer is definitely as an American, but more so as a Southern American. It really is that on the surface to us, until you get adjusted to their culture, Danes seem very standoffish. It comes across as rude and disinterested and dismissive. But again, they are very much a insular society. They support and protect each other. Generally, the friends that they have in kindergarten or first grade are the friends that they're living in retirement homes with. They have a small, intimate bubble that they trust. And so this idea, like Americans, it'll be like, oh, I moved to college out in Arizona, and so 7 of my bridesmaids are from there, but I went to high school in South Carolina, 8 are from there. Like, Danes don't understand the fluid concept of Americans moving around for jobs and better opportunities. So I think they can come across as really cold. And so for me, it was hard to go on the bus the first few months and smile at somebody or say good morning, and they look at you like you're nuts. And you just have to realize that's how they get ready for their day and or decompress. It's like, let them have their space. That's their culture. So that was tough to get used to.
Yeah, that's very different from our Southern lifestyle for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any special sports where Denmark residents excel?
Yes, handball. Handball, I think they win either gold, silver, or bronze almost every year, and I think it was invented in Denmark. So handball is the big thing there.
Can you explain what handball is for those of us who?
It's like adult, really amplified dodgeball kind of. I mean, like, I don't know the rules very well, but it's like yeah, they're not wearing padding, and it's one team on one side of, like, looks almost like an arena where you'd play volleyball, and they're like spiking. Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
handball. You should look it up. It's really fast paced. It's fun to watch, but I don't understand the rules.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look that up later. So one interesting question that we got is, where would you prefer to live now?
Between just here in Denmark,
I'm assuming that's what they mean. Yeah.
um, truthfully, probably Copenhagen, for various reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then a follow-up question to that. What was the food like and what was your favorite? I'm also very interested in your answer to this.
It depends on how adventurous you are. So my father he'll eat bison, snake. So, he got there and loved eating pickled herring. He thought it was the best thing ever because it's fresh fish. So it was really salty. And I think it's disgusting. I can't stomach it. But their traditional old school Scandinavian Danish dishes are heavy like that, like potatoes and fish and pork. Um, but I think they've done a really good job of shifting to more modern cuisine and using local resources. But truthfully, and this is a sign of migration and the process they've had with immigration and asylum seekers, the last few decades. But some of my favorite places to eat that were the most fun and enjoyable in city center were shawarma and kebab places. And Danes love to eat there because it's this incredible food that's quick and cheap and it's a lively atmosphere. And so honestly, when I was out and about just popping in for something quick, we always like to go to shawarma and kebab places.
Yeah, those are delicious. I've been to some in some other European countries. It's also very popular again
Mhm.
because of immigration, and
Yeah.
yeah, those are quite nice. I wish we had some easy places like that here in Greenville.
Mhm.
All right, what kind of housing is there for most of the citizens? Do people typically live in apartments or independent homes?
Um, it really depends. I mean, outside of Copenhagen, Denmark is sparsely populated. So there's, I think, 5 or 5.5 million people, and you know, at least about a fourth of them are in Copenhagen proper. I mean that area. So um, most people outside of the city have small homes. This idea of land and just because you can afford it, you buy it, 8 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms, that is non-existent in Denmark. You buy for what you need. And so people's homes are much smaller, generally only one bathroom, unless you've got multiple kids or family units, and then there might be two. So they're very much about conserving space and energy. But in the city center, it is almost entirely apartment based. But a lot of people commute, and even biking from some of the suburbs. In my host family, by train, it was 20 minutes, but I could bike in 30 just because it's so flat. So people still had smaller homes 20 or 30 minutes out in the suburbs, but could bike it almost as fast. So,
Oh, that's great. For those of us who bike in Greenville in the hills,
yeah, it's different.
very different.
Yeah.
Okay, one question we got was if someone were planning a trip to Denmark, how long should they plan to be there for to see most of the country?
Um, that's a good question. So I think if you're going just to Copenhagen, 3 to 4 days, you could probably see most everything and feel like you weren't leaving something you were really excited to see behind. Now, if you want to do a tour of the country, I would recommend you obviously spend time in Copenhagen, probably Odense, which is the smaller middle island. Fyn. Odense is where Hans Christian Andersen was born and raised. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. And then Jutland, which is the main body of land attached to Germany. Up top is Skagen, and that is where the North and Baltic Sea meets. It's a beautiful beach town. There's a lot of beautiful coastal towns. So you could easily spend 10 days to 2 weeks in Denmark if you wanted to do like a whole road trip. But I think in the city, 3 to 4 days, if you're going other places.
Okay, great. All right, when your American friends married citizens of Denmark, were they automatically granted citizenship or do they have to go through the 1 year process?
Oh, it's more than a 1 year process, unfortunately. Yeah, you are not granted. I've had friends that have had to make some really tough decisions. I mean, they have to pass. I had a friend that had to meet the deadline. I think it was 2 years maybe, and you have to take intensive courses and pass that multi-hour written and verbal exam. And they give you a topic a week before, and her topic was the Danish women's suffrage movement of the late 1800s that she had to be able to articulate in Danish for multiple hours with questions. So they're doing everything they can not to grant people citizenship, even married to Danes. And so she will likely relinquish her passport if she chooses to become a citizen. Otherwise, she will keep her residency there. So basically, you would likely need to relinquish being an American citizen if you were ever going to be a Danish citizen.
Oh, wow. Okay. Our next question is, would you host a student from Denmark? And if so, what do you think that they would struggle with the most here?
Yeah, I would, and I would love it. I think there are a few things. I think religion dictating culture and politics very strongly in the US, especially in the Southeast, is something that is, no pun intended, very foreign to them. Outside of the Islamic immigrant community, I think 96% of Danes say that they're spiritual agnostic or atheist. So most people are not actively Christian any longer in Denmark. And so I think that can be a challenge for them. They feel judged. They feel like they don't understand. Um, I think that piece is tough. I think the types of racism and aggressions we deal with here are so different than the things that they're grappling with that it's hard for them to understand, because theirs is so new within the last 30 or 40 years and tied to Middle Eastern immigration, and ours is so much more, has so much more history and complex in other ways, right? And so I think that can be the social issues that we talk about with our friends and family and try to grapple with can be confusing for them. But there are a lot of things they love here too.
I guess they'd also have to get used to our Southern way of talking to strangers in stores
But
and
that's the things they like. My host brother, when he was a teenager, came, and that was one thing he thought was just beautiful. He's like, I love that total strangers are so nice to me and care about my day. I was like, well, they don't really care. It's just being nice, but they kind of do. So he was like, everybody's so nice. So like those are the kind of things that they totally embrace. But I think the things that are, we make it clear that they can feel taboo, and so they don't really understand it. And that's where I've had some Danes say it's really hard for them to process that if
yeah,
they're staying long term in the States.
sure. What is the best time of year to visit?
January. No, I'm just kidding. The sun comes up for like 5 hours on every day. July, June and July and August it's hard because they call it, you can have a great Danish summer or you can have a Danish summer. And so great Danish summers are high 70s, low 80s, sunny, beautiful, couple days of rain. And then normal Danish summer can be 50s and 60s and rainy most of the summer with a few good weeks. And so it's kind of not able to like give it in the way of like wet season, dry season, but you're going to have longer, sunnier days and way better chance of nicer weather if you go in the summer. But if you're trying to do it on a budget and you're willing to deal with the dark, you can fly there and get hotels for so much cheaper if you go between, like November and March.
Okay, good tips. Hope everyone's writing these down. All right. Okay, since most people are considered equal, what's the fashion or jewelry like?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the idea of like big diamond engagement they don't do engagement rings. Most like, you might have heirloom jewelry that's passed down. I mean, they still like nice things, but it's not about being flashy. Like I never saw Danes with big gold earrings or big diamond earrings or big diamond rings. I mean, or like fancy watches. That's just not really how they show status. I think it's more about your performance in life and what you're doing than it is what you can show them.
Okay, yeah, then that's very different from us. All right. Okay, so what are some of the differences between the Danish language and the English?
Oof, so many. It's one of the hardest languages I think to learn. I didn't learn a ton of it, unfortunately. Again, they're highly educated. Most everybody speaks English. I think they said at this point, 96% of people over the age of 12 or 13 speak conversationally fluent English. So it's really hard to learn, but also just it's a Germanic language. It's got several different vowel letters, very guttural sounds. And one thing that can be challenging is in the United States, and I see this as something we should be proud of, we're so used to having people from the world here and different accents and people at varying stages of learning English. And most of us are relatively patient. It's like we know, but Danes are not used to people learning their language that if you even slightly mispronounce things, they'll subconsciously back to English. So several of my friends that had to pass that exam basically had to like force their friends to just correct them and keep talking in Danish because they're like, I will never learn Danish if you keep doing that. So that's part of the tricky piece is they all can switch to English and are comfortable with it. But the guttural sounds and the vowel sounds are really difficult.
Okay, well, that is good news for anyone who's planning to travel they can communicate very easily since so many people speak English.
That's a good point. If you're not living there, but you just want to go on vacation, it's a very, very easy country to travel in. And I want to throw out Danes are standoffish in the sense of like they're not going to smile at random strangers. But if you go up to them in English and ask for help, they will be totally kind and nice to you. It's more just they're in their lane. So I don't want people to be scared to talk to Danes if they're going on vacation. If you need help and you ask them for something, they will.
Good. Okay. What is the level of education of most of the people?
Um, Much like the US, most everyone has finished what's equivalent to a high school degree. I'd say a good portion of the population has like some form of technical training or technical degrees. I don't think they see the same levels of people getting undergrad and higher level degrees, but it's not as much of an issue there for them in terms of like movement with the EU. Um, but I think again that can be the downside of something being that uh, I'm not framing it as everybody needs to go to college, but I think there's a lot of negatives that can come from what we face here in the states. Go climb, 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 and but you do see get completing undergrad degrees there. Some drop. It's still a high rate. It's not at the same rate it is here because if you go to technical school or you get into a career, chances are you're going to be fine given the way that the system is established for people.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, okay. And then a question is, do they learn several languages like some other European countries?
Yeah, so they all start English, I think now in first grade. It used to be third grade. So they will start doing immersion type classes. So when they do English, it starts out like several hours a day, 5 days a week. So they really dive into it. And they also are required to then take a third language. And they can pick between German and French, and they have to pass some sort of mid-range exam for that. But English, they need to pass the high.
Oh, wow, that's intense.
Yeah, so they have Danish, English, and then pick between German and French generally.
Okay, that's amazing. I know a lot of us struggle with English alone. So, um, okay. So we have a question that's asking a little bit more about some of the cultural events in Denmark. So, what was music, dance, and theater like there?
That's not really their strong suit. I mean, music, but for me, it was more on the side of like up and coming indie bands and like younger rock bands and punk bands. And they have a lot of independent venues, but they're not really known like Vienna's known for classical music, or I'm trying to think of other good examples. They're just what they're known for.
Okay.
If you come to the Bulgaria talk, I'm sure you'll learn a lot more about traditional dancing and the culture behind that. But
I like that plug for our next event. Thank
yep.
you. Okay, so one question are, what are some of your must-see places to visit in Copenhagen?
Ooh. Um, I do think if you're going in the summer to go to Tivoli, it is, I mean, it's you walk through the gates and you're like, I'm in a 250-year-old, 300-year-old amusement park. I mean, it's just beautiful and it's right there in prime real estate in the middle of the city. I think it's great. The royal residence and the round church, it's Amalienborg is the royal residence. It's beautiful. It's like four ways. And then across from it is the Copenhagen Opera House. They do have really good international opera and theater performances come through there. It's just not so much a Danish thing to produce. And so they have a beautiful opera house. The same person that designed the Sydney Opera House designed theirs. And I believe the person's Danish. That area is really beautiful. And another area, I don't know if any of you, I didn't include it in this because I didn't really have time, is Christiania. I don't know if any of you heard about Freetown, Christiania, back to Danes being really liberal and progressive in a lot of ways. I think it's in the 30s, 40s. these hippies squatted in land and said, we don't want to pay your high taxes. We just want this land and for you guys to leave us alone. And back then the government was like, okay. And still to this day, there are like hippies, vagabond. I mean, technically they're like hippies, but they've built these beautiful structures from recycled materials. It's legal to sell cannabis in their area of town. So you can buy marijuana there, and they brew their own beer, and they have a lot of vegan and organic restaurants. You cannot take pictures in there. They'll warn you of that, but do not take pictures in there. But they're totally nice. And it's one of the most interesting things to be in this cosmopolitan, forward thinking city and then walk into this little kind of hippie village with these people. They basically made an agreement. They said, we don't want all your benefits. So they don't get the retirement and the welfare, and they run their own little businesses and have odd jobs, but they're left alone and they get to keep the land.
That's fascinating.
So I do highly recommend that. And you can pay people that live there to give you tours, and it's not unsafe. You shouldn't feel unsafe going there, but if you'd be more comfortable getting the history, they can take you as well.
Okay. I love that there are just so many options, like from the Opera House to the Freetown. It's just
Yeah. And the Carlsberg Brewery, there's a really interesting tour. I mean, the tasting room is actually beautiful, and you get 2 beers included. You pay like equivalent to $20 US, but it's a really interesting historical tour of how Carlsberg started and then bought up so much of the international beer industry. So and it's in the original factory, is now the museum and the tasting room. So if you like beer, go to Carlsberg.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because one of the question is, what are the favorite drinks in Denmark? So I'm assuming beer is one of them.
Yeah, it's dark a lot and it's cold a lot. So unfortunately, they do have a high rate of alcoholism. But yes, everybody drinks beer. And that's another thing. Talk about culture shock for us. It'll be a Tuesday at 11:30, and you'll see 4 or 5 businessmen and women having beer and wine, like looking at an Excel grid. I'm like, how do you go back to work? I mean, it's just part of their culture. A lot of people will drink at lunch, go back to work, have 2 or 3 beers right after work, and go home. It's a big drinking culture. But beer, and they make really good beers, and different local breweries have really taken off there the last 10, 20 years. So there's a lot of good local beers. They're not known for wine.
I was going to ask, do they do a version of like Glühwein, the warm
Yeah,
wine?
they do Glüh. Yeah, the mulled wine, but they don't grow any wine.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? And you can always unmute yourself or ask in the chat.
Oh, before we go, just for 1 second, I was going to pull up that last slide again.
Hope some of you now are planning on taking a trip when you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull this slide up because I put my email address there if people wanted to.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, don't be shy. I'm more than happy if you're really serious about thinking of going on vacation to Denmark or planning something. It's a pleasure to talk about with people because I got to spend time there, and I love people to enjoy their time. So don't be shy about emailing me, Ben.Efird, E-F-I-R-D @furman.edu.
And I've put that in the chat too, in case you want to copy and paste it. So feel free to do that. Thank you for being willing to share.
Yeah, of course.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, this is fun. I wish this was my job. I could just talk to people, like go around and give this presentation to people.
Well, many thanks to Ben. And of course, if you think of questions later, you can feel free to email Ben or email explore@greenvillelibrary.org, and we will try to find the information for you. That's what we do. And again, another plug for our next event. So the Armchair Traveler series continues. So we're doing that all of March for Upstate International Month. So our next trip is going to be to Bulgaria. So I hope that you register for that. Go to greenvillelibrary.org/events, and you can hear that. You're actually going to hear from Ben's coworker at Furman.
My boss.
Yes, his boss, the director of the center. So that'll be great. And if you want to attend any of our other virtual events, our classes, activities, we also have things that are on demand for you. So it's greenvillelibrary.org, like I said, /events. You can also check out our virtual activities page. So we have some things that you can do. If you can't attend these events live, we want you to still be able to enjoy. And as always, we please ask that you follow us so you don't miss any of these opportunities. Of course, you can always go to our website, but follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll get updates, see social media posts about things that we're doing, and you can interact with us there. And you can always email us with questions. And you can sign up for our e-newsletter, where we'll also be promoting a lot of these events. So thank you all for coming.
Thank
Uh,
you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Ben. And we appreciate you sharing your time and talent with us. And I know that I'm excited to travel again sometime soon. So,
Next year.
yes, yes, it's going to happen.
I hope so. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Y'all all have a wonderful evening.
Bye, Rachel. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you so much.